But we want to welcome to the show City Councilman of Monterey. It's Tyler Williamson. Tyler.
Good morning to you.
Step up.
I'm a little too far away.
Yeah, it's about this close.
Okay.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Awesome.
So here you are. Congratulations.
Thank
Big
you.
win. And you're into it several months now. And how is it going?
It's going really well. It's a part-time thing, but it really feels full-time, and I've gone into it full swing. You know, how I phrase it to folks is it's trying to come in and respect what's already happening in the city. And so trying to take my time and learn new things that I didn't think I was going to have to deal with once I was on council. And I'll give you an example. We're currently in the mix of trying to figure out what we're doing with the fisheries that Monterey owns the buildings at the end of Wharf 1. And so we're trying to figure out what are we going to do with those and who we're going to lease those out to. And so I'm learning about ground fish, wet fish, something I never thought I would do. So it's trying to respect what the city has already going on, while at the same time trying to come in and insert the policy objectives that I ran on. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and it's a fun experience.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what do you, besides, so I know a little bit about policy,
Sure.
and when you said it's a part-time job, I'm laughing because it really is definitely a full-time job.
Totally.
On top of whatever else
Absolutely.
you do.
Absolutely.
So what are you most surprised by, though?
You know, there's not much that really surprises me. So I've been involved in politics for the last decade now. And so I know that it's bureaucratic. I know that things are slow. None of that politics side of things really surprises me. I ran campaigns. I worked on several campaigns. So none of that really surprises me. It's just nothing beats like being in the position itself. And so it really is just learning new things, like the fisheries. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that we've been having to deal with. You know, we have closed session items where we're talking about, you know, real estate transactions for the city. I've never been in the position where I've had to manage a budget for something around $130 million. So it's a huge responsibility, and you know, I'm representing a lot of groups in the community, and so a lot of constituents come to me with a lot of expectations, and so it's really just trying to balance out what their needs are and what's realistic for the city to be able to achieve.
Yeah. I've been in a lot of meetings recently that have been complaining jokingly about how long it took to get to those meetings because of all the wonderful road repairs. So I wonder if I feel like everybody just needs to hear a little bit about that's good.
Yeah, this interview couldn't have been more timely, right? Actually, I've heard more complaints this past week from the traffic than I have since I've been on the council. And so, you know, I just feel like there's always room for improvement in our form of communication. So I do think that the city does a good job in its communication. You can sign up online to get different types of information depending on your flavor. If it's just traffic that you want, you can get weekly newsletters on construction that's happening within the city. They also try to work with major employers, and so I work at the Naval Postgraduate School. I know that they have it on their tickler to kind of pay attention to anything that's happening so that they can inform the employees to make any alterations to their travel plans to and from work. So I know that there's efforts there. They're doing the best that they can, but there's always room for improvement. So any way that we can try to find better ways and forms of communication to let folks know what's going on, the better that will be for it. But there's always going to be people that just don't know, right? So, but it's how do we help close that gap?
Yeah. But also, you know, we want to drive on great roads.
Absolutely.
So even though I've been late to a couple of meetings this week, I just remind myself we're getting great roads, and that's important. And so what? I'm late for a couple of meetings. It's not a big deal. It's worth the time, and and we can just rib all the city council members about it.
Bring it on. That's what I'm here for. So, yeah. So, in, I think it was 2014, the city passed Measure P, and then just this past year we passed Measure S, and that's for the next 8 years. And so what these funds are dedicated for are to do every single street in the city of Monterey to basically revamp them, get them up to code. So that way we have very well working streets. And this includes sidewalks, and you might notice a lot of times they're working on the corner of the sidewalks. They're making all of the street corners ADA compliant, because we're a city where we represent people from different experiences and backgrounds, and we need to make sure that we're respectful and accepting of all people in the city. So that includes folks that are handicapped disabled.
That's awesome. I have kids in their 20s. My dream is that this area will be vibrant and make them want to come back. They will find housing that they can afford to buy.
Yes.
And that they want to live here. Because this is, I'm here because I want to be here.
Absolutely.
So I love the vibrancy in the city and how it really feels different. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I agree. You know, when I first moved to the peninsula about a decade ago, I struggled. I was moving from San Diego, and I had all my high school buddies down there. My mom was in the Navy, so we moved around a lot, and that's kind of where I ended up going to high school. And so I missed it. It was hard because this was the smallest place that I've ever lived, and there wasn't a lot of young people here. And so it was a little bit of a difficult transition, but it slowly grew on me. And I mean, the outdoors, we are known for our environment. This is a beautiful place to live. We live right on the coast. My partner and I, we were able to buy a home here 2 years ago. We live up on Franklin. We have a peekaboo view of the bay. So it's a beautiful place to live. And during the campaign, I actually ran on housing because I hear over and over again how unaffordable it is to live here. And I've been homeless before myself, so I know that that's a huge issue here. And I have that experience of having had to live through that, sleeping out of my car, trying to find a place to eat and take a shower and use the restroom. So it's not an easy thing when it's so unaffordable. And so I knocked on a lot of doors during the campaign, and I would start off the conversations by asking people what issues were most important to them, and then I would follow up with trying to address their issue and then sharing them what my platform was. And oftentimes those two overlapped. And so affordable housing was the thing that came back time and time again. And what I would share with folks when we would talk about housing is I would say, your kids would not be able to afford the cost of living here unless, one, you're okay with them living with you into adulthood, or two, you're wealthy enough to help them find a place of their own. But other than that, there's not a job that they can find in this town that they can afford to find something on their own.
Yep.
And so it's how to, I don't think we're going to solve that issue, but how do we help close that gap? Because if the question is at the end of the day that we want to create community, then we need to find a space for our children and grandchildren to be able to stay in the same town so that we can have our grandparents help babysit, right?
Yeah.
So it's becoming more and more difficult, and it's not becoming any easier. So how do we, it's a challenge to us, but how do we solve that problem?
Well, and I believe people are good. I believe we love our families. So I have to believe if that's what we're looking at all the time, how do we keep our family together as much as possible, we will find a solution, even if we have differences in our strategies and tactics.
Absolutely. I mean, and I heard from, in response when I would share that with folks, people would say that they understand that and they get that. And even if they make relatively good money, right, because of the cost of living being so high here, it's not as if they can, accommodate them, right? So it's a challenge for folks even of a wealthier class. Yes. So it's a challenge for all of us, and I think that there's a lot that we can do. And if I could just kind of approach this and share my two policy sides to the housing issue. On the one side, it's housing development. And so I know that kind of makes people a little bit nervous, but one of the fundamental things in regards to the affordability of housing is as the population continues to grow, the supply of housing stays stagnant. So we're having more families out there, but we're not building more housing for them. So what happens is that only the wealthiest people can have those houses, and it pushes the people at the bottom further and further down. So we need to develop more housing. One of the things that I'm doing is that during the campaign, I reached out to candidates across the peninsula so that we can develop a regional housing coalition. And we're now that we're almost all of us were elected, we've developed a strategic plan to figure out policy that we can achieve on a regional level, because we have to recognize that the housing issue is a regional issue. It's not something that ends at the borders of Monterey, Pacific Grove, right? The jobs are in Monterey. People drive to Seaside, Marina, Salinas to go go home.
Yeah, Greenfield,
that's
Soledad.
Right. That's right. So how do we work together to come up with a solution? And housing development is a key element of that. And if we're going to develop, I'll say, if we're going to develop housing further away, then let's develop a solid transportation infrastructure so that way those folks have a way to get to work and we can reduce the traffic congestion.
Yes.
And then on the other side of the housing issue is renter protections. So 70% of the people that live in Monterey are renters, but yet they receive very little attention in regards to policy. And so I'm not exactly sure of the solution there, but something needs to be done. Something needs to be addressed. So I'm going to try to work with the city and seeing if we can have a town hall and have a conversation around renter protections with the community.
Yeah, and with the property owners. I mean, it's a difficult dialogue.
Totally.
But I think the more you include everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, what was great is we had a meeting a few weeks back with property managers, some tenants. There was Dan Albert, one of the other council members, myself, and some of the city staff. We all met at a roundtable discussion to re-look at the voluntary rental guidelines in the city. And so we did some changes to them, and we're currently working on finalizing that. So there are some efforts being made there, and it really does take working together. Yeah. And I think that's been kind of one of my overarching, I guess, challenges, or I think it's where I spend the majority of my time, is just trying to find a way of bringing people to the table, having that conversation. It's about building partnerships and collaborating on these things.
Yeah. And then you said there was a second policy.
Oh, so the first side is the housing development. The other side is this rent.
Oh, got it.
Rents.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
So what about economic development? Because along with, these wonderful things, we need to make sure people are making enough money to live.
Totally. Yeah, it is. I mean, well, if you look at the county in general, right, one of the two main industries that we look at are the ag community and the hospitality industry, and those industries tend not to pay high or medium wages, right? So how do we create other opportunities for jobs? And I want to stick with this, right? I think it has to do with the housing, right? If you have young people wanting to come in, starting a business, try to bring something new into the community, but yet they can't afford the cost of living, it makes it difficult for somebody to come in and just do that, right? So I don't think it's the city's place to say, hey, we need this, so give it to us. So I think we can help guide it maybe through principles, but to bring somebody in, we need to create the space where we want somebody to come in and provide whatever it is that they have.
And we all know this, that if you're in the hospitality industry or something like that, you probably have 2 or 3 jobs anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for doing everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited. I'm embarrassed that I'm just meeting you. Really embarrassed on my part. And delighted and look forward to lots more conversations.
I'm surprised you guys ever met.
I know.
She's got all the wine down there at her place.
Are you not a wine drinker?
I am. Full disclosure, I'll say that my partner and I are members at Galante.
Oh, great.
So we love his wine. It's some bold reds.
Yeah, you like bigger reds.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. But I'll come down and visit. Absolutely.
Yes.
One other thing I'll say before I depart you guys is, if I could walk away from anything from my experience on being on council, it's finding a space to get people more involved in the political process, right? So how do we knock down those barriers and create a space? It's already difficult for especially people in the working class, for younger folks that are a little bit less interested in wanting to pay attention to politics. How do we create an environment where we let them come out? At the end of the day, it's their responsibility to participate, right? So we can put it on the individual, but systemically, what are we doing to prevent or allow those individuals from being involved? And so if I could walk away from council after this 4-year term, it's that. So please come out and get involved.
Definitely.
And if people do want to get involved, they want to find out more information, what do they do?
Yeah, so you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm probably, because I'm the youngest on the council, I'm the one that's mostly interacting on social media. You can also email me at tyler@monterey.org. That's Tyller. I know my parents made my life difficult.
Yeah, really.
2 L's, Tyller at Monterey.org.
Or maybe good.
This is true. This is very true.
Yeah, because when I was typing in your name to submit it to the press releases and to the Herald and things.
Am I doing this right?
Yeah, it's like there was a big red line under it. It's like, no, that's right. It's 2 L's.
Yeah, add that to the dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, we're lucky to have you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
We're
Thank
lucky.
you. Thank you guys so much.
All right. See you again soon?
Absolutely.
All right. Hang around, though, would you?
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks. All right.
Bye.
All right. Shag Bag Show on Power Talk 1460 AM and 101 FM for your Saturday morning, live from the end of the bar at the Del Monte Golf Course in beautiful Monterey by the Bay for